the Bill 20 Beaver River Water Authorization Act. This is a bill that is about something very central to our province and to our communities, the issue of having safe and secure drinking water, something that should be a fundamental need and right for all Albertans. It makes sure that, that safe drinking water is a top priority and will allow the extension of existing regional water lines to carry water from the North Saskatchewan River into Maleg and Whitefish First Nation, which are in the Beaver River Basin, necessitating an inter-basin transfer, which will be the sixth in the history of doing this legislation. So I know how important the Water for Life programs are in this province. We were, in our constituency, very thankful to the Minister of Transportation for approving Water for Life funding in the community of St. Michael. It is a community where the license for their shallow drinking water, I'm trying to think of the word, anyway, their shallow water aquifer is something that, that has been threatened over time with human development. And it is something that people being out in rural communities are quite dependent on. And so when we know that, that in rural communities where it is more difficult to have easily accessible drinking water, we need to, as a province, support the measures that allow for that to happen. There are, of course, many factors that can affect water: agriculture use, oil and gas development, and really just growing populations of people drawing on the same amount of water. So it's a good thing that we can see that there was a large amount of stakeholder feedback. There was a lot of consultation done, and it's also good to see that this is fully funded, and that the residents of St. Paul County have been consulted to ensure that, that life remains affordable for them to be able to access clean drinking water. So, of course, this is especially important to First Nations, and I want to actually thank the Minister of Indigenous Relations for allowing me to wear this Métis scarf today while I deliver remarks. So, of course, it is an obligation to address treaty rights and to be very honest about the economic impacts that clean water drinking has. I've heard from other members of this House, unfortunately, that they would not support a budget that provides $100 million to providing drinking water for First Nations. I was proud to stand in this House and support a budget that allows that that fundamental need to be extended to communities that have been under drinking water bans time and again, and that is just not acceptable in a province where we have so much. So that is why I'm very proud to be part of a government that is caring and inclusive and keeps these things top of mind. I know that growing up in Edmonton, it was very rare to think about the availability of having clean drinking water, but getting to know some communities like Bruderheim, where they have a water co-op, people have gotten together without the consistent support of government to ensure that they do have water for their livestock, water for their communities, and also, you know, I take for granted that even in urban areas, we take for granted that firefighting is something where we have access to more water than we do in rural areas. Often, I know when I was visiting the families in the Scarrow area in Lamont County, there was concern over water being returned to cow-calf operations where water had been drawn off of people's farms to help fight the blazes that were in the area. And so this, of course, is a fundamental need and something that should be a human right, but because it is not a right, we have to do what we can to incrementally make sure that communities that are most affected are supported by our government. So, of course, there has been news that there are companies that would like to privatize all of water, and that is troubling when we know how necessary water is for human life. And so I think it's something that it is the role of government to ensure that people have access to clean drinking water. There has been respectful and thorough consultation with Indigenous communities, and I want to thank the Minister for Indigenous Relations for taking a leadership role that is partnering with communities to make sure that that people are not just having solutions forced upon them, but are actually engaged in thoughtful dialogue to ensure that everybody that comes to the table is well aware of all of the issues, and that when solutions and are brought forward, that there has been actual real consultation with nations and Indigenous peoples that deserve to have their voice at an equal level at the table. And so this does involve $9.5 million coming from the province as part of that $100 million that was in the budget for 2017-18, and it helps leverage federal dollars. And I know that in rural communities, it is incredibly important that when there is money on the table from the federal government, that we do everything that we can to ensure that those funds are not left. There are sparse resources often in rural communities. I know that this is something that came up with internet connectivity in rural areas, and when there is money that is being offered, we must do everything that we can to make sure that none of it is left on the table. And that does expire in 2018, and so I'm glad that we are moving forward with this. So the government is ensuring that we move forward with strategies that allow us to have a clean and sustainable environment for all Albertans. This is something that follows in line with the Climate Leadership Plan. I know that this was a huge election issue back in 2015, that people were concerned that that there would not be a future for their children and for their grandchildren that they themselves enjoyed growing up. And so I know that, that this is something that my constituents absolutely support. You know, this is something that I hear from the opposition that we can't afford. And I think that that flies in the face of economic development that we know can happen more readily when people are healthy, when people have just the basic needs of having clean water. And so I'm glad to see that EPCOR is allocating 200 million cubic meters of drinking water to bring to bear on this project. And also that there has been extensive consultation with NGOs and the area to ensure that water rates are still comparable with other communities, and that no one is being unfairly put upon to be able to afford their own water. This will affect St. Paul and Malag and the First Nation of Whitefish Lake, and people out there will quite clearly benefit. So this achieves goals of safe, secure drinking water, healthy aquatic ecosystems, reliable quality water for a sustainable economy. It also implements the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and it is absolutely a vital necessity to have clean drinking water to small rural communities and to First Nations. I understand that this bill will have no impact on other license holders, and I think it's a really important thing to make sure that we go ahead and leverage federal funding to make sure that we make the most out of the dollars that we have in such a constrained economy. So I am proud to support this bill. I know that my residents of Fort Saskatchewan, Vegreville also support this bill because they know how important it is to have availability of water. So thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll close my remarks there. Thank you.